I think it's very important that this passage says that we are speaking. Now, there are two parts of singing. There are the words, and there is the music. What would this suggest to you as the most important part of those two parts of the song? The words. You're speaking something. And a preacher is concerned about what he speaks, that he speaks the truth, that he speaks it effectively. And that's what a song leader needs to be concerned about also, that we're singing the truth, that we're singing it effectively. And the thought is that we're to speak to ourselves in psalms, hymns, spiritual songs. Several efforts have been made to try to distinguish between those things. I'm not sure it's possible, but we've got them in our book. There's some psalms that are there, wonderful psalms to sing. The Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want, and just numerous other psalms that are there. I love the one that's in this book, The Law of the Lord is Perfect, Converting the Soul. Wonderful song. Psalms, hymns, not necessarily inspired, but written by those who are spiritually minded and can present truth in poetry that most of us as preachers wouldn't be able to present at all in that form. We're to sing and make melody in our hearts. And I think, again, the melody in the heart is almost more important than the singing. Some of us can't sing very well, but that melody in the heart is what the Lord is really listening for. He's not listening for the beauty of our voice, but he's listening for the melody in the heart. But the song leader must have it in his heart if he's going to encourage the church, the followers, to have the melody in their heart. And that's what the Lord is listening for. But this last is extremely important, that it is to the Lord. There's a sense in which it is from the Lord, but it goes back to the Lord. It is inspired in us through the Spirit's words as we have studied and come to know the truth, but it's given back to the Lord in hymns of praise and thanksgiving and teaching that we give to him. And it is very important that we get our attention off of ourselves and put our attention on the fact that we're singing to the Lord. And whatever we do unto the Lord is to be done with all our heart. It's to be done with zeal. It's to be done just as in the very finest way that we personally are capable of doing it. Now, we'll borrow and don't not be real particular about the context or anything, but the idea is the Lord expected that 2-talent man to work just as hard as the 5-talent man. And I've often thought that the 2-talent man really was tempted to not, or the 5-talent man, not work as hard as the 2-talent man, because he could just double two of his talents and come out looking a lot better than the 2-talent man could. But however capable we are, the Lord deserves our faithful, dedicated effort to do the best we can in leading the singing, the worship of the church. I don't know whether you have anything to write with or not. I had really should have perhaps have asked that you have something, but I'm going to take just a minute and ask you to think of 4 things that are necessary in order for a person to be a good song leader. 4 things. If you don't have something to write on, just memorize them and think of 4 things. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. 4 things that are necessary for a person to be a good song leader. And then I'm going to ask you to tell us some of those. Take a minute. don't believe we brought writing material, but anyway, it looks like everybody's thinking anyway, and that's what we want to get done. I'm going to give you just one more minute. I'd like for you to come up with 4 good things necessary to be a good song leader. This young man has been thinking very hard. Do you have any idea what needs to be? He doesn't have to have a full mouth of teeth, does he? No, he doesn't. Well, what do you think a person needs to be a good song leader? You think of anything?
For doing their best.
To do his best. All right, I like that. All right, he needs to. And I like that very much. That's a good start. All right, something else. Somebody else give me something now. Where's that? You're going to talk loud. Confidence. Okay, good. I like that too. That's good. All right. Somebody else. What? Preparation. Good. All right. I'll quit putting numbers there. We just get some things. Okay, something else. Back there? Looked like you had something there. You opened your mouth anyway. All right, some musical ability, and we'll just include that. Some people, and that would be to get the pitch and start the song. That certainly is important. Yes, sir. Way back there. A desire. Okay. If a man desires to be a song leader, desires good work. All right. Desire. Let's have something else. What? Good. I think that's very important. More so than we really think it is. Okay, good. Yes, sir. Beat time. All right. Okay, good. All right. Really, we're talking about leading there, aren't we? All right, very good. Let's have just 1 or 2 more, and then we'll.
I just put love.
Okay, good. All right. You need to love what you're doing, and people can tell that. They can tell whether you are enjoying what you're doing or whether it's just a drudgery of some kind. Okay, good. The song selection. In fact, many times that's neglected. A lot of what it takes to be a good song leader is something that you do before you get up there. And a lot of people don't really understand that. I'm glad you've done some thinking on this. And I'm going to give you some thoughts of mine on it that I hope will be beneficial. Do you think a person's character makes any difference? If a band's not a genuine Christian, he has no business leading singing. And I'd rather have a man who is limited in his musical ability than some fellow that has a lot of musical ability but lacks character. I remember when I was just a boy. A man coming to the church that was known for a good song leader, but he was just visiting, and the question was, shall we use him for leading? And the response was, his character is just not exemplary, and that's so. Character is very, very important. There's some knowledge of Scripture that's needed. I've cringed almost to see some of the songs that have been led sometime in some places I've gone, which indicated that there was very little knowledge of Scripture. There must be the ability to carry a tune. We get into that. And you know, really, though additional knowledge of music is good, some of the best song leaders I have known were men that just didn't know much music. Well, have any of the rest of you had that experience? Now, he needs to be very careful about if he's going to lead, to be sure he knows the song. But you don't have to have a doctor's degree in music. In fact, many times it hurts because a man gets so involved with the music of it, and particularly sometime of his voice, that he just forgets all about leading the congregation. That's what James mentioned a minute ago. Your responsibility is not to put on, I got that later, to put on a show of some kind of your voice, but rather it's to get the congregation to sing. And a good voice is useful, but it's just not essential. Some of the best leaders I've known. In fact, don't tell anybody I said this, but when I listen sometime to some of the services at Ember Hills on the internet, when I'm not there or wasn't there, I realize that some of the best song leaders we have are not the men with particularly good voices. We're not as sophisticated with our recording of the singing as some churches are. So the leader's voice comes through pretty strong on the recordings. We only do the invitation song for good reason. But I can identify, but he's a good song leader, but his voice is just not great. There's several I could name. I won't, but I could name whose voices are not very good, but I prefer their song leading because they lead the singing and the congregation follows. And that's what really, really matters. And I do want to stress the fact that there needs to be desire. Somebody mentioned loving, a desire to serve and not to show off. Driving up here this today, I just remembered a couple of letters that we received, and one particularly from a young man who was a pretty good song leader. But he came to Ember Hills for 2 or 3 weeks, and we, at that time, the elder who had been there with the church from its very beginning, always led singing on Sunday morning, and he was an excellent song leader. And I felt really kind of set the tone for the whole congregation. But then we used different men at Sunday night, and, well, this young fellow he thought that was just really bad. And why don't you use some other men to lead singing on Sunday morning? And he left us. He just went off and left because he was miffed that he wasn't given the first opportunity to do what he thought was the most important. That's bad. To be seeking opportunities to be up in front and to lead in a public way and to be unhappy if you don't get an opportunity. It's pretty bad. It's an opportunity to serve. That's what the song leading's all about, and not an opportunity to get the spotlight turned on you. Okay, not much was said about selecting songs in our discussion here and the things that were suggested, but I think it's one of the most important things of all. Let me just give you several thoughts. In the first place, I think that songs need to be chosen primarily for the words, not for the music. It's true enough, sometimes the best words don't have the best music. But you need to be very sure that the words are something that are edifying. We're teaching and admonishing one another. We're praising God. And some songs are just the same thing over and over and over again. They call it 7-11 songs. You've heard that. Maybe 7 words you sing 11 times, and there's no substance to them. I remember Hiram Hutto saying to me, there's a difference in a hymn and a song. And, of course, he wasn't speaking technically. But there's something just songs but some are the ones that will stick with you and give you strength in time of need and encouragement when you're discouraged. Be sure the words, of course, are scriptural. Some words even get into our book sometimes that are not altogether scriptural. And if I sing, there's some I just don't sing at all. And if there's some others I sing, I have to do some mental gymnastics to redefine some words in order to sing them from the heart. Be careful about the scripturalness. Choose songs with a strong scriptural content. In other words, scriptural words, scriptural truth in scriptural words. I think there's a lot to be said for that, not just human ideas. And choose songs that are about God and Christ and not about us. Actually, as someone suggested, really, hymns, you can almost tell what century, or maybe less than that, half century, a hymn was written in. The oldest ones are all about God. And then there's another group that came on that were all about Jesus. And now if they're not all about the Holy Spirit, they're all about me. There are some songs that are real popular that are just me. I'm going to get on somebody's toes here in spite of everything. But that song, the new song, I know a lot of people like it, maybe one of your favorites. But what is it all about? Take it in the book. Isn't it in this book? Take it out. And I'm not, if you lead it, I'll sing it. I'll sing it. It's not, but but I'm asking about the quality. The hymn, let me borrow a book to see it, if you don't mind. Okay, it thrills my soul to hear the songs of praise we mortals sing below. And though it takes the parting ways that I must onward go, I hope to hear throughout unnumbered days the song earth cannot know. They sing in heaven new song of Moses and the Lamb. I want to hear. I want to see Jesus bringing me a crown. And really, there's no praise of the Lord in there at all. It's all about me. Now, as I said, I'll sing that song, and if you lead it, I'll sing it. But the emphasis seems to me to be too much on me and what I want to hear, what I want to see, rather than on the Lord and His greatness. That's just a small example. All right. Choose songs you know and the congregation will sing well. Now, I think it's good to have practice sessions and let the congregation learn new songs. But a service is not the time to string out. We had a service not long ago when a man led 3 songs, and all 3 of them were just almost totally new to the congregation. Good songs, excellent songs, but nobody knew them. And especially visitors, I think if they need to know at least one of the songs, even if they don't know them all. I don't think all the songs have to fit a sermon. I don't think everything has to be made around the sermon. Pick your own songs that will be edifying and beneficial. Now, if a preacher is preaching a sermon about being about the good shepherd, Jesus the good shepherd, you might pick out some songs about that. But maybe one at least is good, and a theme, in my judgment, is not necessary. I've sometimes puzzled fellows to announce that now our songs are on this theme, and then he'll sing the second one. I figured, how does that fit this theme? And sometimes he has to take a lot of time to explain it, and if you got to explain it, you just forget about it. Let's just sing the songs, and if they fit the theme, fine. If not, well, it's all right. Songs of praise and prayer, meditation, comfort should not be neglected. Now, do you see, as song leaders, we need to think about these songs. And the order of them, I think, is important. Begin with a song that is lively. If you begin with a very slow song, and there's a time to sing slow songs, but if you start with a slow song, you're going to have a hard time ever getting the congregation to wake up and go with you. Start with a lively song. Don't use more than one unfamiliar song. I don't think just if you lead several songs to throw in one unfamiliar, but then let it be between some familiar songs so they can get back into the groove, if you please. Use a prayer song, I think, before prayer. I believe that's a good idea to get people ready for prayer. And a lively one before the sermon. And I like to stand up before. It gives the congregation a little bit of wakes them up and ready to listen, and gives the preacher time to get ready to go, and I think it's helpful. Not necessary, but those are just helpful things, I think. And I think it's important not to use a new invitation song, but choose an invitation song that will be motivating. I've noticed a tendency. Invitations, I have more and more problems with them. But we do that, and it's not wrong to do it, and it's good to do it. But a preacher gets up and he just really, really urges people to respond to the gospel and obey the Lord and all of that. And then we get up and sing something that has no appeal whatsoever, just another song the song leader wanted to sing, and so he throws it in after the invitation. Have you had that experience? Have you noticed that? Invitation songs, and I know there are not that many of them, but usually you can find an invitation song that hadn't been sung this week, and if you have to repeat something, okay, but a song that encourages people to obey the Lord. It doesn't necessarily have to be baptized, but just to obey the Lord. A motivating song for an invitation song, I think, is impossible. And now we're getting into something that too many song leaders don't do. Preparation in advance. Read at home over the words or sing them to be familiar with them as possible. One or two of our best leaders at home actually do not use the book. They've memorized the song so that, who mentioned eye contact, so that they can be looking right at the congregation and leading. Don't you like a preacher that can do that? Now, we all have to look down at our notes occasionally, but if a preacher just reads everything and looking at it, you're bored. And if a song leader is just looking down at this book all the time, he loses. He's singing and you're singing, but there's no connection. He needs to look up as much as possible. And really, if you don't have the words memorized, look over it in advance so that you'll be familiar with the words, at least. And you can look, I just read the church's one foundation is Jesus Christ our Lord. I don't have to keep looking for that. And many times we sing songs and get to the chorus that you know and could sing without the book, and yet leaders many times tend to keep their head in the book. That eye contact is important, especially when you're beginning. But I'm getting ahead of myself just a little. But what I'm talking about is doing something in advance. One of the best song leaders I ever knew, very, very experienced, said he never got up to lead singing without spending 30 minutes in preparation. I could ask you, when you lead, how much time do you spend preparing? I've seen too many men just sit down and get here about 5 minutes early, start flipping through to try to find what they're going to sing. Your work is too important to treat it that lightly, to be that unprepared, really. What would we think about a preacher? Sat down here and you see him flipping through his Bible trying to find what he's going to preach. You wouldn't think much of that. Preparation. And if I can't get any other thing across to you this afternoon, I'd love to get this across to you. Take time to select your songs, sing through them, see what they say. Decide, and that may be on the next thing here, decide what stanzas you're going to lead. Is that the next thing? Just make sure the wood works. But decide which, so that you don't have, of course, when you put them on the back here, you have to do that in advance, don't you? That's one of the advantages of putting everything on the screen. Decide what stanzas you're going to sing. You don't have to sing every one, but sometime to leave out a stanza of the song breaks the thought of the song. In fact, that's one. I like the songbook you have, but I have a little concern about the fact that certain verses have been left out sometime when they really were needed. When you sing, "But drops of grief can ne'er repay," what do you mean drops of grief? The verse just before, "Well might I hide my blushing face when his dear cross appears, dissolve my heart in thankfulness, and melt mine eyes to tears. But drops of grief can ne'er repay the debt of love I owed. Here, Lord, I give myself away." But if you leave out that stanza about the tears, the next stanza doesn't really quite make sense. You follow that? See about that. If you can leave out a stanza without breaking the thought, good, fine, it's okay. But be sure you don't leave out something that is germane to the meaning of the song. And remember, and this is important, the church is not going to rise in its quality of its worship, of song, very high above the standard that you set. A good song leader can help the whole congregation to worship God. But if you don't do your part, if you don't do your work, then you're not going to lead, they're not going to be able to sing. So before the service, I'm kind of hung up here on this, but I can't overemphasize it. Before the service, practice your songs. Be sure you can get the pitch right. You owe it to the church to do that. If you can't do that, just tell them, well, I'm going to do some work to improve my song leading, but get somebody else to lead singing now. And let me keep preparing myself so I can. You need to learn to get the pitch and lead the song with or without a pitch pipe. Determine the proper tempo. Decide each song has its own tempo that makes it meaningful. A preacher, a teacher, doesn't if he says everything real fast, it just doesn't fit sometime. Sometimes things have to be said slowly so they'll have real meaning. And that's true with singing. Sometimes the song needs to be slower. And you run through it, alas, and did my Savior bleed, and did my sovereign. Oh, it's no good. On the other hand, sometimes there are others that have to be sung rapidly, or they'll absolutely wear you out. I remember one time I was going to preach, and the fellow got up and said, well, the song slipped me. Well, anyway, it was it was to be a song of marching and worship. Faith is victory. And he started off, encamped along the hills of light, ye Christian soldiers rise. And I started thinking I'm going to have to cut 10 minutes off my sermon. And if that's the way we're going to march to fight the devil, he doesn't have anything to be afraid of. That's a marching song, and it needs to be sung with one tempo. But you turn to another one before the Lord's Supper, and it ought to be slower. So you need to work all that out in advance. Determine the tempo and think of singing the words more than the music, and determine which stanza. I've already got that. But I just can't. I said to you a minute ago that if you don't get anything else, I hope the idea of making preparation in advance has gotten through. Now the actual leading. We're going to get to that. And I'd like for some of you to lead a song or two here in just a minute, if you would. I know we have maybe more I anticipate would be here this afternoon. My wife said, how many are you going to have? I said, I don't know. It doesn't matter to me at all, but people that are interested. Show confidence. Somebody's already said that, haven't you? We used to have in one church when I was a member, there was a brother that get up and say, number 416. Whatever you do in word, I thought, are we going to get this one off? I did wonder. But if you're going to lead that song, you've already looked at it. 416. Everybody got it now, all right? And I know the first line because I prepared it. Whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord. That's so important. That first note and that first line is going to determine whether you're in charge of the song or whether the congregation is in charge of the song. Be sure you get the pitch. Well, I've already done that, haven't I? Sound the pitch. I think that's a pretty good idea. It's not. I don't always do it when I'm leading, but it's not a bad idea, and I rather would encourage it. Do, mi. Then you can start together. Do, mi, sol. It's necessary to be real loud. Do, mi. You don't have to do that. Congregation will hear you. You're not showing your voice, but to hear what it's good for you to have the arpeggio in your mind, but it's good for the congregation to eye contact before you begin singing, and then I say take charge, and I think that's really important, especially in the beginning. Some of you know I broke my arm a couple of years ago, and one of the first times I led after that, I don't lead much anymore, but the congregation was singing real well, and the tempo was fine, so I just wasn't waving my arm, and some of the ladies came around, is your arm hurting? I said, no, it's not hurting. When it's going good, I didn't see it needing a lot of beating, but what happens if you're not beating and it starts slowing down, you start beating, you get attention. You get attention. And I believe it's good to have the real 4/4, 3/4, 6/8 to know how to beat that time. But the main thing in that, I don't think I've got that here, is to be sure you've got the point of the beat. Have you ever seen anybody just beating around like that, waving their arm? My son-in-law, Holly's husband, was not a Christian for a long time, but he obeyed the gospel and was just getting busy with everything he could do. And finally came to him one day and said, we don't have a song leader. Would you? Well, do my best. So he got him led singing. And on the way home, his little boy said, oh, Daddy, you didn't, there's something you didn't do. And he said, what did I say? You're supposed to wave your arm. Well, that's all right. But when you wave your arm, whether you just do that or what you do, there needs to be a beat. You need to see the beat. And practice that. That's you should be. In fact, I had an assignment one time. I had to lead singing several times with a rather large congregation, but they were broadcasting. They didn't want to hear my voice for some reason. I don't know why. But I had to lead without singing at all. Well, the way you do that is to get the beat clear enough that they know exactly where the beat is supposed to be. Where'er you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord. And if you can't do anything else but that, don't do it that way. It may look pretty that way, but the point you're doing is get the beat out. Let's all do on that song. Do all know that? All right, let's do it. Let's put your hand up. Whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord. Okay, you get the idea. Toscanini, to get into a little classical music, was perhaps the greatest conductor of my lifetime. And he had the NBC Symphony in New York and others. But someone asked one of the players, what do you attribute his greatness to? He said, it's that stick. I always know exactly where I'm supposed to be at any given time. I feel the stick. It's the beat, of course. So do that and work on that. And as I said, whether you can do 4/4 time or 3/4 time, in fact, I'll just say, I hate to say this, but one or two of the best leaders we have at Ember Hills, all they do is that. But one of them, the whole body moves, and you know exactly what's the beat on it. That is an extremely important thing. Establish and maintain the tempo, and put yourself wholly into the singing, and sit near the front, especially to begin the invitation song. It bothers me just a little for somebody to be way off back in the back, and you start leading the invitation, and you're coming down to the front to get. You need to be on the front, and start the invitation song just as soon as the preacher finishes the invitation. Well, I think that's what I had in mind to say. But I'd like for us to take a song or two. 413. And we're not going to be able to have everybody work on that just now, but let's all stand up and see if we can. With my hearing problem, I have difficulty sometimes feeling. What is the key of this? Okay, the key of this is C, isn't it? All right. All right, and it's what kind of time? And it starts on the upbeat. Whether you know that or not, that's not the purpose of this. Okay, everybody, look at me now. Everybody knows this. We know what it is. All right, we're going to pull it here, but okay, ready? Let's go. To Christ be glory, all might be true. Is that right? What did I say? I read it too. That's the way not to do it, frankly. That's the wrong number. All right, ready? Okay. Hand up. 4:15 now. I think we're together here. Hand up. Ready? Okay. To Christ be glory, all might be true. His banner be unfurled, and born of till is secure the conquest of the world. To Christ the Lord be true, for He will go with you and help you all your conflicts through. To Christ the Lord be true. Hey, the man here didn't have the 4/4, but he was getting the beat on there, and that's really the important thing. That's the most important thing of all. Sit down for just a minute. Let's look at another one. Don't you wish the congregation would keep going like you did just then? You're going to have to make them do it. That's your responsibility, to make them do it. Now, your voice, a strong voice helps a lot. But if you have the microphone, it will help you too. That'll pick that up in some measure. But it shouldn't be that you have to do it entirely with your voice. That beginning is so important, to get your tempo established from the beginning. And then just don't let the congregation drag you. Some of you knew my dad, and he was in a meeting in a church years ago. Obviously, he died 30 years ago, but a long time ago. And I knew the church real well, and I knew the song leader, as he was called there. But my dad I was a long way away, and he was writing me just a general report of the meeting, because I knew the people there, you know. And right in the middle of a long paragraph, he said, Elmer Gardner is being led by the singing, and he went ahead. That's exactly what he meant. The man who was supposed to be the song leader was being led by the singing. In other words, he started, but then the congregation just decided whether to go fast or slow or whatever, and he was not in charge. Now, we don't want to be self-pushing. We want to be humble, but a humble man can be a leader. Jesus was a humble man, but he was a leader. And you can be a humble man and still be a leader. And that's what your job is, to lead the singing, not to let the singing lead you. And so, as I said a minute ago, you've got to have that tempo in your mind and then be prepared to lead it. Let's look at this 439 that I mentioned a minute ago. Have I got the right? Yeah. That one's a little hard to beat time on, but it's a good song to sing, and you need to practice it a little bit, and one of the things you need to do is to learn to sing it like you'd say it. It's a good song that you can do. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. And that's the way it needs to be sung. All right, E flat. Okay, now what? Just everybody help me here. Don't stand up. Sit down there. All right. Oh, we're going to be. Look at me now. The Lord. And I would suggest we just do it up and down, just for all of us here. That's just good. Okay, ready. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is suring wise the simple. More to be are they than gold, give them much fine gold, sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. Got a couple of young fellows up here who make good songs already. Oh, very good. All right, and that's of course a slower song than the other one we sang. And it ought to be slow, but not draggy. And one of the things that you need to do on a song like that is to hold those long notes out. Don't let them die. There are a number of songs that have those long. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. Hold those notes out, and in your voice, build them up. There's a principle of even vision. They tell me that the columns of the Parthenon in Nashville and the old Greek Parthenon actually swell a little in the center, because otherwise they would look like they were concave. And so the Greeks would swell them just a little so it would look perfect. And sometimes long notes that you have to hold out, if you let them die, then you lose the whole value of the song. But some of those long notes, and I just quit beating sometime and just build it up like that until you get through it, because that makes a big difference in the way the song goes. Are there any questions you would like to ask? We'll find somebody to answer them. Yes. If you can increase your volume a little bit and stay just a little bit ahead of them. Now, I don't like just doing it all the time. Some leaders are just automatically stay ahead, but just go ahead of them. I'm leading this. Establish your authority, and that's what you've got. I think eventually they get the idea. It's hard. I don't know why in the world the congregation wants to fight with a song leader. I've often said, if all of you sing like a mother does when her son is leading, we'll have a great song leading. Celebrate singing. Yes.
How are you going to use the instructions prior to the song? You know, if you do something, obviously you can do something different, you know, singing one verse and then the chorus and then the verse.
Yeah.
You know, my first thought from this song is dragon.
Yes. The law of the Lord.
Yeah, this one I'm reading it. It's not much of a voice of it. How valuable do you think it is to say something like, you know, I never know.
Most of the time, I think that's counterproductive. If you're going to, as you say, if you're going to make some changes in it, but I really believe too much change. I've heard somebody get song on each side of the page. We'll sing one stanza of this, then we'll sing a stanza of this, then we'll sing a stanza of this. And it just doesn't fit. But if you're going to do something a little like that, certainly, or we'll sing all the stanzas and then the chorus or something, a little bit, but too much talk becomes. But on a song like that, your leadership is what's going to make the difference. Let's just go through that again and note those long. If you let them die, the song dies. Let it is that the pitch? All right, let's sing that. And let me show you what I mean by that. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, enlightening the heart. More to be down a little bit. You're going to do something that the congregation may not be prepared for. If you'll hold out the note just before you do it, they'll be aware what's going on here, and then they'll follow you, especially if they know you sometimes do that. That helps. But I appreciate that. But too much talk. I have heard one or two men that I thought made good, well-prepared comments that helped, but most of the time it's better not. Just lead the song. And if you need to just say one little item or two like that, we're going to sing the 3 stanzas and then the chorus or something, fine. But too much talk is I think, disruptive. Good questions. Another question. Good.
If it's a thing like this song in particular, we know that the songs, we know that the notes are extra long, and we know what's going to happen because most of the congregation is going to drop off. Watch them, because if they want to drop off with it. But if they want to keep going, what I always do, especially if I find myself almost out of breath and I know a long enough time, I always text them and watch them very carefully.
You're suggesting something there that I'm not sure I'd ever thought of or said. But when a congregation drags, if this many men sitting around here are watching the song and singing with it, you're going to keep the congregation going. And that's an excellent thought. You've led singing. You know what the song leader is doing when he's trying to get him to sing. Well, help him. Now, don't try to get ahead of him. I've heard in England one time, we had a fellow that came singing so loud, and he was loud, and the building did a lot of ringing anyway, that it was well, if he wanted to sing fast, the congregation had no choice. He wasn't supposed to be the song leader. He just stood back there singing tenor. But, and one of the ladies said after the service, I thought there for a minute we were being hijacked. If you were at a congregation sing, don't hijack the song service and try to lead it. The leader may be too slow, but don't you try to get it go. But if he's making an obvious effort to try to get the song to move along, if all of you, and many times I just watch his mouth. If I can't tell what I'm getting off his beat, then I just watch his mouth and stay with him. And if this number of people scattered out through the congregation will help the song leader to keep it going, it'll keep going. And there's one man I remember places where I led singing he was a song leader, but when he wasn't leading, he just dragged the thing down. Don't you ever be guilty of that. Help the song leader, don't hurt him. Oh, was there another question back there?
Songs that have like the soprano and tenor doing one thing, and then the altos and the basses are doing another thing, and it's jumping all around.
Well, I'll tell you what I think about them. I don't sing them. There are one or two songs that I just don't sing. I don't think rounds have any place at all in the worship of the Lord. If we're going to teach and admonish one another, we have to know what one another is saying. And when one part is saying one thing and another part saying another thing, the only way I can be admonished is to stop and to read what they're singing and not sing myself at all. So that's pretty well what I do. I just rule that out. I appreciate you asking that. I get that off my chest. Please don't sing one of those while I'm here. I won't help you. We need to, I don't have an objective moving parts as long as we're saying much the same thing at the same time. Maybe one's saying something. In fact, there's some of the songs that have some of that. You can almost see it. For the mercy of the Lord endures forever. This one, the mercy of the Lord endures forever. You can see some of that. But when I can't tell what you're singing because I'm singing something different. I'm glad you asked about that. All right. Yes, sir. James? James, that's a matter of judgment and taste. In England, if you pardon me, some illustrations from England, they'll have 8 verses or 9 verses sometimes of a song, and you sing them, and they move right from another to another to another. It's like a good sermon with 8 paragraphs or something, but no chorus. And I said to one of the brethren one time, it's interesting, he said, I said, at home, we 3 or 4 verses, about all we made. He said, but you have choruses. And the chorus is the repetition that becomes sometimes repetitious, just to be real honest about it. And I personally feel like there's some songs that are improved by that. I wouldn't just do it. But I quoted some of At the Cross a while ago. The fact is that the stanzas of At the Cross were written before that chorus was attached to it. It was something totally different. Somebody just put that on there. And I think it's better without it, unless you sing it right at the end. But too much of that, I agree, James, can become confusing. But the chorus is what is repeated over and over and over. And sometimes the verses, I think, become more meaningful if we don't repeat the chorus every stanza. That's a judgment, and when you lead, you do what you think is best. You mix it too much, gets confusing. Yes, sir. We old folks have problems with that, don't we? We sure do. Of course, you put the hymns on the screen, I guess. That's one of the advantages of doing it that way. But I have embarrassed myself more than once by joining in the chorus when the rest of the congregation wasn't singing it. So I understand what you're talking about exactly. And one other question. An hour's up. I don't know how long this is supposed to go, but I hope it's been beneficial. Another question? Anybody else? I'm going to ask you this one thing. What have I said I would like for you to remember, whether you remember anything else from this hour? Advanced preparation. And it's going to make all the difference in the world in how you lead. I'll just use this illustration and close. When I was in college, and I'm not necessarily recommending it, but when I was in David Lipscomb, and I'm sure not recommending that, but anyway, we had a song leaders contest, and you couldn't use a pitch pipe. You had to lead the song and get the pitch without a pitch pipe. Well, there were several of us in the contest, and you'd see a fellow going around the campus, you know, his pitch pipe. You knew who was in the contest because they were working and working. The night comes, and fellows that normally couldn't get any close to a half step. In fact, that's what they allowed. Fella couldn't get close to a half step the pitch. He'd get it too high or too low. He'd get it almost exactly right. Why? He'd practiced. And if you will plan your songs in advance, go through them, select them carefully, practice them, practice getting the right pitch, practice the proper tempo. If you'll do all of that in advance, I can guarantee you're going to do a better job of leading singing than you would do otherwise. And when you are serving the Lord, it is extremely important that you do, as somebody said, the best you can. Lord doesn't expect perfection of any of us, but he has every right to expect that we do the best we can. Once, when I was in high school, I was on a quartet, and the governor was coming. And we worked and worked and worked because the governor was going to be there. Well, somebody beside the governor is in this worship service, and we need to keep that in mind as we lead the songs, and even as we follow the songs. The singing is an important part of our worship, and it is going to be good or mediocre or poor to a great degree, depending on the leader. So if you are not capable of doing a good job, work on it, learn it, and serve the Lord that way. And you'll be blessed by it. Others will be too. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I wasn't complaining about the half step. Thank all of you for coming. I really like Scott's suggestion. If I'm up here, yeah, I'll take all 50 up here. I can carry it out. I think most everybody does that work. So, if I got